The first signs of division did not come through open conflict, but through subtle changes in tone and behavior. Conversations that once flowed easily became cautious. Laughter grew restrained, and shared meals were no longer shared with the same warmth. Small decisions, who managed certain lands, who spoke during family gatherings, who was informed first, began to expose the invisible hierarchy that childhood had concealed. Masanachi's children felt it keenly, though none of them could yet name it. They sensed that something promised to them by birth had quietly slipped away long before they were old enough to defend it. Elizabeth's son struggled with his position. Raised in harmony with his step-siblings, he did not see himself as separate, yet tradition now placed him above them. Elders visited him alone. His opinions were sought, his authority affirmed. Some relatives encouraged him to assert his rights fully, reminding him that leadership was not meant to be shared. These whispers planted seeds of doubt and pride, testing the values he had formed during childhood. Slowly, without intention, distance grew, not from hatred but from pressure and expectation. Odoh watched these changes with quiet satisfaction. For the first time, his neglect seemed to produce order rather than chaos. He believed authority required tension, that harmony weakened leadership. Yet he failed to see what was truly happening. The compound was no longer bound by love, but held together by obligation. Old wounds, buried beneath years of silence, began to breathe again. In Amangwu, the foundation of unity was cracking, and what lay beneath it was darker than anyone had prepared for. The unveiling did not happen in a single moment. It unfolded slowly, like a truth that had waited patiently for the right season. Glances became loaded with meaning, and silence began to speak louder than words ever had. Masanachi's children started to notice how they were treated differently, not through open cruelty, but through exclusion disguised as procedure. Decisions about land, future plans, and family matters were made without them, justified by tradition and authority. What once felt like a shared destiny now felt like a story rewritten without their consent. The love of childhood did not disappear. It was simply overshadowed by power. Elizabeth's son, now fully aware of his position, began to change. The voices around him grew louder, reminding him of what was his by custom and age. Though he remembered the years of shared struggle, fear crept in, the fear of losing authority if he remained too generous. His kindness became cautious, his openness guarded. Agua's children sensed the shift as well, caught between loyalty and survival. The compound, once filled with unity born of innocence, now echoed with restrained tension, as everyone learned that adulthood demands choices childhood never required. Odoh's presence loomed heavier than ever, though he spoke little. His earlier neglect had shaped the present conflict more than any spoken command. By refusing to lead with care, he had allowed resentment, ambition, and unresolved grief to grow unchecked. Now, as hearts revealed themselves through action rather than confession, the truth became undeniable. The past had not disappeared, it had matured. In Amangwu, the compound stood as proof that what is buried in silence does not die. It waits, and then it rises. By the time everything stood fully exposed, there was no shock left, only understanding. The compound of Odoh no longer pretended to be what it once was. Each adult now stood firmly in the place life and circumstance had carved out for them. Masanachi's children, older and wiser, finally understood that love alone could not protect them from tradition, nor could patience restore what neglect had stolen. They carried the memory of a mother they barely knew and the echo of a brother whose absence had shaped their lives. What they lost early had trained them to survive quietly, to endure without expectation. Elizabeth's son stood at the center of the compound, the rightful heir by custom, yet burdened by a leadership shaped by unresolved history. He had gained land and authority, but he had also lost something harder to name: the ease of brotherhood, the simplicity of shared belonging. Agua's children watched carefully, learning from the mistakes of those before them. And Odoh, now old and frail, sat surrounded by the results of a life lived without care. His silence, once powerful, now felt empty. The compound he ruled had endured, but it had paid a heavy emotional price. In the end, Amangwu remembered the story not for its inheritance, but for its lesson. Neglect does not disappear with time, it transforms. Love delayed becomes conflict, and silence becomes a voice of its own. The compound still stood, passed down according to tradition, but its walls carried memories no ceremony could erase. And so the story settled into truth. Families are not destroyed only by hatred, but by the absence of care.